Well, good morning, everyone. I am thrilled that you are here this morning, and I'm thrilled with this tremendous opportunity to commence our first Southfield Public Schools TED Talk, and an opportunity for us to share not only with our staff, with our children, but with the community at large, an opportunity to learn about the theoretical background of some of the initiatives that we have going on in our district. And we just look forward to sharing more and more of these. But the first opportunity today is to hear about the theoretical anchoring and the background and the understanding about the counseling model, the strength-based counseling that we have implemented at both of our comprehensive high schools in our ninth grade. And I could speak my lingo, but it's so much more important to hear it from an authority in the area of counseling and an authority in the area of strength-based counseling. And at this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Yvonne Callaway, who will be sharing with you the information that we're sharing with our teachers and that we're learning in the district. And I have to say that I am so anchored in this model, not only for the counseling programming and the learning and the unfolding of how we wish to engage in a more positive way, so to speak, with our children, but it also flows into what we work with in the classroom with our teachers, that, you know, this is all good for all kids. And I also wish to just resonate and share that this model and the theoretical background of it is so important for me as a leader as it relates to looking at opportunities instead of always the deficit in terms of mindset. And so I'm just thrilled that it is our first one because it resonates throughout our community in such a positive way. And with that said, I will have Dr. Callaway to come up front and join me here at the podium. And for those of you who don't know her, she is a tremendous tenured professor at Eastern Michigan University, and she has been working tirelessly with our staff and with our counselors as it relates to this whole new movement and understanding. So with that said, thank you, Dr. Callaway, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really a wonderful opportunity for me. I'm at a point in my career where I get to do the things I love, and I can honestly say I have loved working on this project. It gives me an opportunity to get closer to the young people that we all care about and that we all want to see flourish. And it takes me a little bit back to my roots. I started out as a school teacher and loved it. So I'm going to try to introduce you today to the strength-based model of school counseling, to talk about the theory, the need, and to catch you up a little bit on the Southfield Public Schools story that we've been moving through since November of 2012. The strength-based model is grounded in the notion of a half-full focus. And so we talked about like not looking for remediation, not looking for deficits. And the last time the Guinness Book of Records recorded the highest IQ, this was the honoree with an IQ of 228. They since dismissed it, though, as a non-grounded way of evaluating people, so we all keep it straight. But what she had to say was that success is achieved by developing our strengths, not by eliminating our weaknesses. So we use the bridges that we have to climb higher. So we always look at the half-full focus of students, and that's what this is really grounded in. So the strength-based theory of counseling says the more positive strategies, abilities, skills we have, the better off we are. Sort of like a money in the bank theory. The more you have deposited, the more you have available to withdraw. So you don't think about the money that you don't have, you think about the money that you do have. So we teach people how to use the strengths and abilities that they have and how to appreciate those. And certainly in light of today's news, we know how important that is for young people to feel useful, to feel needed, to feel that they matter. And that's one of the great things that's come out of this project, as counselors feeling more empowered. and we can transfer that and share that with teachers, with administrators, but most importantly with the students that we serve. So strength-based counseling really focuses on building on what you have, and every one of us has something unique upon which we can start to build and grow. So it's grounded in cognitive behavioral theory, and that theory says that what happens isn't nearly as important as what I think about what happens. My grandmother used to tell me it's not so much what the other person think of you, it's what you think of them that's going to affect you. And again, we see a real impetus, some information that our young people need. So how do you get past what in cognitive behavioral therapy they call the activating event? How do you get past A to B, your belief about it, your belief about yourself, your belief about what's effective? And then how do you change your consequences? How do you feel what you get in return? So it focuses on helping young people to understand that they're in charge of this. And that's really important. And they feel empowered. And particularly in adolescence where the sense of empowerment is so important. How do you get there? So this offers them some strategies and skills for getting there. So they mediate their thinking to mediate their consequences. And then there's the social development model. And that model talks about what you get exposed to. What opportunities do you see and have in your environment? And if we look at what our young people want to be, survey 7th grade, we have a lot of wannabe rappers, a lot of wannabe athletes, because those are the opportunities that in their perceptions are rewarded in their community. And here's another way that we get to be empowered. I try to be happy. I mean, even before the song, but now I got lots of inspiration. Because when young people see educators, it's important that we look as happy as ought to be. And the Jay-Z, why we gotta look sad and downhearted? So that sense of what you do mattering and being valuable is not just something we talk about, but something that we model. So as we become engaged in feeling empowered, we can't help but contribute that to other people. And then we start to talk about them playing basketball as much as they study math. It's okay, do both. But we have to begin to consciously and intentionally create options that seem viable to students. And then there's the self-determination theory. And this builds on the other two, and it says, if you show me some learning opportunities that fit my life and are relevant to me, then I can make it work. So that means sometimes we have to transition and try to look at different frames and different ways of doing things. So one of the things we tried to do in this program was use metaphors to teach, and I do that a lot. I tell people my first psychology teacher was my grandmother and my father. And my father would say things like, I heard your motor when you first drove up. And that meant don't even try it, okay? Don't even try it. So as I've gotten more mature, I use those things when I'm engaging with people. I don't often stop to say, well, now this represents the reciprocity that people often expect when they're engaging socially, and perhaps they're looking for something that I'm not prepared to deliver. What goes off in my head is I heard your motor when you first drove up. And I can teach that to young people and save a lot of time and trouble. So that's what self-determination theory talks about. What are some of the postulates of strength-based counseling? Strength-based counseling says that it's way more powerful to build on strengths than to work on weaknesses. Think about how motivated we are when it's something that we like and we're going to feel good about versus something that we know we got to do because we got to get better. Okay? I compare it to me going to the bank and my nephew going to exercise. I'm trying to teach him self-management skills for money, and he's trying to teach me self-management skills for physical activities. We both have a strength. And so it's more powerful to work on your strengths than to just focus on your weakness. So that's the way we bounce off each other. We share our strengths. Development is holistic and contextual. My grandmother used to say, you like an oil spot, you spread everywhere. That's how development is. We take ourselves with us wherever we go. So we want to develop people holistically and focus on how that matters. So how I engage is going to affect my ability to do well academically. It's going to affect my building relationships with my educational community. It's going to affect my willingness and motivation to go home and share the word, share what I've learned in school. We used to have to say something every day that we learned. So my father said, I went to work all day, so you better tell me something. And that notion that we are learning, that we're gathering, and our young people are doing that. And we have to compete, but they're doing it more often from videos, from MTV. And we have to compete with that. We have to make it real. Growth in one area influences growth in other areas. So again, an oil spot, you can't contain it. And what we wanted to do with this program was spread it. We realized when we looked at the American School Counseling Association standards that there was a lot of work being done academically and for career development, but we had kind of not had time for personal and social development, realizing that oftentimes that's the stone upon which we'll build everything else. So this program says, let's take time for that. Let's take time to recognize the truth that if I grow part of you, all of you is going to be influenced. And resiliency, like the ability to bounce back. What keeps you going? Because in truth, we're going to have setbacks. And our young people are going to have a lot of setbacks. They're going to have the issue of poverty, because the poverty gap is widening. So socioeconomic status is going to be an obstacle. Many of them are going to have issues based on gender. You know, even though we're growing as a nation and we're ahead of everyone else, Michigan, in fact, is at the end in terms of equity of pay for men and women. And in spite of our president, there is no such thing as post-racial America. And that's before we even begin to talk about issues like sexual orientation and religion and ability differences. So absolutely, our young people are going to need the ability to bounce back, even from everyday little things. I was thinking about how, you know, middle school is a place for gossip and developing those little cliques, but it was a small group. It wasn't on the internet. I said things to my friends that have long been forgotten. They're not on the internet. We learned not to put it in writing. Text is writing. So they're going to have a lot of things to overcome. And we've tried to talk openly and honestly about that during this series. How do you bounce back from things like imposter phenomena if you're a woman and you're in charge and there's a voice that's always told you and the rest of the world, maybe you can't really do it, honey? Or what do you do when you're an African American or a Latino student and you take the ACT and one of the things that asked you at the beginning of the test is ethnicity, even though we all know that brings up stereotype threat? And if you care about your academic performance and someone threatens you with a group membership from a group that's not known to be smart, now you're nervous about your performance. Ask the question at the end. We know better. But since I can't change the test, we can change what we teach young people about your resiliency, your ability to bounce back. I tell my nephew, I want to see you do what that ball does. Bounce back from a math test. Bounce back from an English paper. You can do it. The same power, and we have to teach our students to transfer it into the academic and the career domain, because they got it. We just got to show them how to use it. You know, that's how the new technology now, I get something new, and I got to wait for one of my great nieces to come over and show me how to work it. Okay, strength-based school counseling targets all students. And that's really the job of the school counselor as described by the National Association and the state of Michigan. Our job is to service the entire population. There are other specialized mental health care providers like social workers and psychologists who in fact serve the people at either ends of the curve, the people with special needs. Our job is to hit everybody. So this program targets every student. We want to flip the script. We want to emphasize signature strengths. So we want to begin to develop in young people something that a lot of us struggle with. When we get a compliment, and somebody says, wow, you really did that well. You know, oh, thank you. I got a lot of improvement. Because we're taught to focus on what's not working somehow. We think that makes us more acceptable. And remember the other groups I talked about, the women, the minorities, the socially, economically disadvantaged? Those groups are taught even more to focus on what they don't have and why they don't fit and don't belong. So we got to flip the script. When something's broken, don't worry about that. Work with what you got working right and keep it moving. And one of the things that I learned again from my grandmother, and one of the metaphors that we used was, it's better to light one candle than to complain of the darkness. See, the movement for civil rights is not active, but this is the movement for human advocacy. And we need to teach our young people how to light their candles, how to use their strengths. I mean, you got the rest of your life to work on your weaknesses. You know, and that's what I tell students. You know, I was on academic probation when I was a freshman at the University of Michigan. And I graduated 4 years later with honors. And I never had a lobotomy. I just started using my strengths. They like that one too. They go, you were on academic probation? Yeah. And the important and the prideful thing about this program is it meets standards. See, I'm a data-driven kind of person. I want to know if it works. I want to see what the consumer reports say. And I think we owe that to children. You know, we know there's some things that work. Let's be accountable for doing them. And this model provides us with accountability. We can predict outcomes. It's like a GPS for helping students grow. We just got to turn when it says turn, look up when it says look up, and refuse to accept that any student doesn't have strengths upon which they can build. So that's where we really want to go with this. And then the collection of rich outcome data, which hopefully next year this time there'll be lots of that we can talk about. Robin has been working with the counselors and myself, and we've been setting up a framework to look at what kinds of things we've learned. And if you go in the buildings, you can see signs of the program. So the postulates of school counseling programs, everybody can succeed. All students can succeed. And we know that students will live up or down to our expectations like people. And this is where the self-fulfilling prophecy becomes so powerful. And there was a powerful piece of research done back in the early 90s. A group of multicultural counselors went into a building, and it was a middle school, and they identified 60 eighth graders as late bloomers. That's all they did. They randomly picked out 60 names and told all the people that worked in the school that they were late bloomers. They came back a year later. Any guesses what happened? You know what happened. Tell us, Marcia, what happened? Yeah, they bloomed, right. Great, like tulips right now. They were blooming away. Because what we project onto students, they're like hungry little sponges. They'll pick it up. If we see them succeeding. I remember I used to work in, do some volunteer work in a middle school, or Ella Fitzgerald School, which really went from like pre-K up to 6th grade. And so one day I happened to be in the building. There were these little like 3rd, 4th graders fooling around in the hall, waiting down the principal, standing outside. They're already in trouble. I said, "Excuse me, gentlemen." "Who are you talking to?" "I'm talking to you, gentlemen. I'm sure you couldn't be aware that none of the princes in Africa ever behaved that way. And since I can tell that you clearly have a lineage to there, I'm wondering what's going on here." Oh, this lady gotta be crazy. The kids often give me that look. Are you kidding me? Like, really? Didn't matter. See, children like it when you're corny. And guess what they did? They straightened up. They lived up to my expectations rather than down. And often we encounter they're like, "That's why you out here in the first place, 'cause you're bad." You know, so, The reason you out here doing this is because clearly you're not aware. And so let's increase awareness. And again, that's part of a grounding and strength basis to help people become more aware of what's right about them. And we've already talked about this. Social development stimulates academic development. And then we believe that counselors can intentionally promote resilience in students. How about that? We believe that we're good enough at what we do that given the opportunity, we'll get the job done. The program now, I'm going to get a little bit into sort of some practical stuff, because when we talk about theory, the other thing that happens, it gets kind of esoterical and abstract. And you know, if you're working with young people, you got to have something concrete to hand them. So this is what Grotberg has identified as ability categories, and they're dynamic and they're interactive. And I'm going to step away a little bit because my slide is really small. How about this? And this is built on the dimensions that young people feel they have certain external resources or support that are available to help them grow and develop. So they need to have trusting relationships. They need role models, structure, rules, and encouragement, not just for being independent, but for asking for help. Now, how often do we say, boy, that was a good idea, you came and asked? So we want to encourage that. If you want to pack to go on a trip and you know you're going to Alaska, or you know you're going to Florida this time of year, you need to pack different things. So unfortunately, many of our children are focused on the wrong destinations. And we want to refocus them, and we can, but we got to make sure they got the right stuff to take with them. So if I'm going to refocus you, I got to be loyal and trusting. And so this is giving counselors an opportunity to get out, get in the classroom, and establish those kinds of relationships with students. I need role models. And what we've tried to do through the metaphors that I'll talk about at the end is encourage students to get role models outside of class, outside of school. So learning beyond the classroom to build relationships. Then I am. How do I see myself? What's my sense of my concept? Am I lovable? Am I proud of myself? Am I responsible? Am I able to figure out what's going on with me and what's going on with other people? That makes me feel calm. When I don't know what's going on with me and I don't know what's going on with you, it's a fight somewhere. Either internally or externally. There's a lot going on with them. They just need somebody to turn on the lights and help them figure it out so that they can bounce back. Forewarned is forearmed. So we want to help them understand those things. And finally, I can. My sense, my estimate of my efficacy. If I believe I can do it, I'm going to keep at it. That's why after school we see kids shooting hoops and rapping. I want to see some math and reading. Belief that we can do it. So how do I interpret my performance, my environment, and my opportunities? So if I think it's a hostile environment for me as a woman to know all the answers in science, I'm going to keep my hand down. If I'm in a group after school and I think it's a hostile environment, if people say I come from University High, I'm not going to talk about school. We got to keep it real because they live in a very real context. And so part of the other thing that we did is help them talk about redefining what's strong, what's weak, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. My favorite phrase with young people, Google it. What is strong? How are you defining that in a way that you can be strong and be effective? Now, if you define strong as grimming, I have a difficult time connecting that with effective. So let's talk about ways you can really be strong and be effective, because we all want to be strong. So if I try to squash that urge, I'm wasting my time. I want to rechannel it into what works. I need to know I can make friends. I mean, especially all the things that are going on around here. The tragedy in the news this morning is about not being able to make a friend. We can teach that skill. If you can learn to drive, you can learn to make a friend. But there are lots of laws about driving, and who has to teach that? But this is the place where the implicit law is that we teach young people how to make friends of themselves and of other people. Can I communicate if something's going wrong? Can I problem solve? My grandmother used to say it. Here's one that always got me in trouble, either with my face or with my mouth. You know, there's more than one way to skin a cat, but we always got to do it your way. But we want to teach young people there are different alternatives. You don't have to fight about everything, and sometimes you don't have to fight at all. And managing myself and my impulses is just part of what I do. Like in every phase of life, there's development. I tell my undergrads, I work with undergrads on a volunteer basis, so I don't know why I do that, but I like it. And I tell them, I just can't do that. I said, well, you know, when you were in preschool, you couldn't really make it to the restroom either. You left that in preschool. So when some of the things that you could not do in high school, you left in high school, you're in college now. You hit the big time. And they joke and laugh. But it's a reminder that, in fact, we do have to leave some things behind. And as my nephew liked to say, just suck it up. But there's nothing wrong with telling young people that sometimes in life that's what you have to do. I don't always go to work because I'm excited about going to work. Today I was. But not always. So what about the need? Here's where it gets like really encouraging. If we look at the developmental assets that youth have, we can predict whether they're going to do positive or negative things. Like if you're looking at your vacation time coming up and you look at your bank book, you can predict where you're going. Or if you had an idea like me and then your house has another idea, I can predict where I'm going. Short distances. Okay. So whether we're thriving or whether we're negative, you can go back to what's in the asset account. What are their resiliency strengths? Developmental assets that support motivation, social engagement, and regulation have the same influence on academic success. Now here's what we got to stop and think. As testing in prior grades. If I can get you motivated, get you responsible for yourself, you're going to go as far as your prior grades and test scores say you will, if not further. And where we sink in a lot of money, and this is important, but pupil expenditures, curricular requirements, teacher preparation, and leadership pull the same weight as motivation, social engagement, and self-regulation. So it makes sense that we should spend some time, some energy on making sure that young people have the skills to do that, to be socially engaged. It's sort of like you go to a party and there's a line dance. If you know how to do it, you run it on the floor. If you don't, you kind of drag it back. So we want to get everybody online, so to speak. And then we have evidence that strength-based programs are effective in addressing behavioral issues that influence persistence and success. The University of Massachusetts in 2010 did a mega analysis of counseling research studies. And I gave you that on your handout, so you don't have to try to take notes and write it down. And this is what they found out. There are things that matter just as much as where we put our money that are free. And if we work on these things, and here's the biggie, high numbers of assets narrows the achievement gap. And every district in the country is focused on the achievement gap. Social advocacy groups are focused on the achievement gap. It's important that we get all young people on a level playing field. Having assets in terms of their personal social competencies are going to help to level the playing field. The SPS story, and I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. We started in November 2012, and what we have done is do an audit because we started with numbers. And then the administrators and the counselors agreed on looking at what the data said and trying to make some changes. A counseling study group got together last summer. There were 4 people that worked on a way to look at how this was aligning with what was already being done and how it could be implemented for this school year. So then in the fall, we started having 9th grade work group planning meetings. Oh, there was also an introductory survey. So at the district level, there was some surveys, some planning, the work group meetings. We drafted a proposal for an advisory board and a district mission statement and philosophy that will likely be voted on in the coming academic year. So we've been doing it in steps, and it's all been aligned with the national model for school counseling. At the building level, the counselors introduced the model to the students and the staff. They developed and delivered 8 lessons, which they may be finishing up this week. We're going to collect data also this week or imminently. And in June, there will be some data analysis and program evaluation. So here's again what's, now I've tried to give you a little piece of the program. It's all, well, yeah, it's all based on the American School Counseling Association Standard 7.31 that talks about personal and social competencies. Real simple statements that students will get the knowledge, attitudes, and skills to help them understand themselves and respect themselves and others. What do the counselors do about that? Following instruction and practice, students will demonstrate personal responsibility, positive self-attitudes. Specifically, what will they be able to do? Identify and discuss personal strengths. What are they? What do they mean? What do they look like? Explain how these can benefit them in school, in career, at home with their families. And think about resilient strategies. So what can I do when life is tough? What can I do when there's a difficult, negative, or challenging situation? What can I do when I'm treated unfairly? Keep living, I tell them, it's going to happen. So here's what we did. Lessons 1 through 3, we introduced the cognitive behavioral therapy and the ABC model. And so we taught students to do thought stopping. What are you thinking about this situation? And how does that affect what you're going to do? One of my favorite examples is I walk up and I accidentally step on toes. Well, I'm going to step on Linda's toe. I'm going to step on Jackie's toe. I'm going to step on Nicole's toe. Well, Linda been knowing me a long time. She's like, I know this chick is clumsy. So she laughs it off, right? Now, Jackie's known me for a while, but she's heard from Linda. Watch her. She's stumbling over. She's like, oh, she bears watching, and she'll laugh. But Miss Christian has heard some different stories. She said, you know that chick? A little passive-aggressive. Watch her when she's around. And then, you know she doesn't like you. You don't see it. You see that text? It was on Facebook. Now I step on Miss Christian's toe. And Miss Christian gonna straighten me out. There you go, there it is. And that's what we actually practice with students in class. Like, what's your body saying? What's your mind saying? How can you turn your mind to something different and not get caught in somebody else's trap? You know, we used to be a song, I don't remember who sang it, and I won't dare sing, but it was anytime the hunter gets captured by the game. And my dad used to say, you like an accident looking for a place to happen. And we all know people like that, right? So when you hear their motor, when they first drive up, you don't have to get in an accident if you have something else to do. But what you believe about the situation is going to determine your consequences. So Linda and I will get closer because now we've shared a laugh. Jackie and I will, you know, we still got a chance because we didn't fuss. But it's over for me and Miss Christian. Okay. So what you believe about a situation has a lot to do with how the situation turns out. So we looked at local and individual school news about ineffective outcomes. And, you know, as things have it, because things really happen in the world, we used the Cass Technical High School incident with the athlete. We talked about what happened, what was going on, and when we got into lessons 4 through 6, we talked about what did identity have to do with it. Suppose the security guard had been a woman, or suppose the athlete had been a female. So we talked about how dynamics, how identity and status, suppose the student hadn't been a star athlete, identity and status has an impact. Suppose the person had been a principal instead of a security guard. So how do you solve problems in context? And that's what we begin to do in lessons 4 to 6. Look at your identity. Look at the dynamics that go on. And they understand it's happened to them already. But that made a nice incident that people could see and relate to. So we have to give them things that are meaningful, relevant, and fit for their experience, not the same old stories. See, when we first started doing this right after the audit, some people said, well, can't you buy a program that does this? Isn't there a curriculum? This is the reason why. It's got to be relevant. It's got to fit. Has to be in context. And the counselors reported what dynamic lessons these were, how students began to take them over and share from their own personal experiences and talk about making decisions in the moment versus stepping out and stepping back. And that was one of the strategies that we taught. Step out, step back, take inventory. So we spent those weeks doing that. And then we went to interpersonal stories and cyber situations. And one of our counselors shared an incident that we used for the groups about receiving a text message and how the text message spiraled into unpleasantness. Because when you see people, you can read a lot more. And teaching young people that only about 15% of communication is actually words. And so when you're operating in cyberspace with chopped off words, you get a chopped off message. And one of the things that we talked about, and I teach my freshman mentees, is when you write an email about something that displeases you or about something that you don't have a positive review of, write it to yourself, let it simmer at least 15 or 20 minutes, and then come back and read it and tell me what you think if you got it. If it still works for you, change the name and send it on. If it doesn't, forewarned is forearmed. So if you're looking for a fight, you probably find one. But there are ways to dodge them when you don't. And that's what we talked about in the group. And then finally, lessons 7 and 8, which they are in the process of conducting now, is talking about employing strengths and doing it in the context of multiple situations. And one of the things that we talk about on here is also using respectful and pro-social communication skills. So throughout the processes were instruction, we taught. We had large group discussions. We had individuals respond to like emotions drawn out of the hat. We did a photo stroll where students walked around and looked at faces and tried to interpret the meanings. We did some group role plays and scenarios. This week they were going to do an intro of like the expert's chair, like you're in the expert. Here's what happened on a cyber communication. What would you do? Was lesson 7. And lesson 8, we're combining practice with an assessment. Because one of our disappointments was that the initial survey didn't tell us what we thought it would. Because all of us are used to giving socially acceptable answers. And so it just didn't give us practical, what are you thinking, what do you know how to do. So the final assessment is a bingo game, and it's based on the grid that I showed you. I have, I am, I can. And like traditional bingo, it has the 25 squares. And then we have a list of metaphors that we've used in the program and skills. And students, as they play the game, will insert numbers on the bingo board to indicate exactly which strategy, which skill, which metaphor could apply in a given situation. So we're looking forward to the outcome of that. It will be rich data. And it's going to be a lot to manage, but we hope it'll tell us some things about specific situations. So that's been our process. We've really focused on using strength-based methodologies, creating hope symbols. I'm a big visual person, and I think that we have to find some ways to compete with the internet and videos. And I'm also an old school reader, so I think that we create really great visual images in our minds. And our young people are doing this. So we wanted to shift that to some positive images. So we used some metaphors, and every week in the buildings, and I think every day in some buildings, a student made the announcement of the metaphor for the day. And then we had, for the week, and then we had taglines every day to help them think about it and process it, and how did it apply. And we asked them the homework assignment every week, or outside of classroom learning, nobody likes to hear about homework, was to write the metaphor on a card and talk to someone about it, 2 people. It could be a classmate, it could be a teacher, it could be a sibling, a parent. How do we make what's happening here relevant and fit and extend beyond the classroom? And we wanted people to talk about it in the community. And for me, this was a biggie because, like I said, my first teachers were my grandmother and my father. And just in this short time, I've probably used 10 things that they said to help you get a clearer idea of what we're trying to do here. So I think the more young people get a clearer idea of what they're trying to do, and the more they talk about it at home with their friends, the more it's reinforced. See, they're going to talk. So we got to give them good things to talk about, meaningful things to talk about. Talk about the vacation that you're going on. So that's what the metaphors were intended to do. And I just put some samples up here. What we did in terms of strength memories, we hope that the experiences in class provided strength memories for students. Times when they figured things out, times when their friends figured things out, times when the group had a aha, or what do we do about that? So those are memories of being able to wiggle through and figure out difficult situations. The strength cards were every week. The other thing they had to do at the end of a session, or every time they had a session, was write on a card a statement of positive self-talk. Like, it's a hard job, but I know I can do it. Or I'm struggling, but I'm going to keep moving. Or this is the best I've ever done. And what counselors would do is then post those anonymously around their office, in common areas, in the 9th grade corridors, so that students then saw them every week. And also there were signs for the metaphors that were up outside the 9th grade classrooms each week. So trying to work learning and repetition in a positive way. Bling is not everything. A detour doesn't mean defeat. So those were some of the metaphors of self-talk that we had students do every week as a way of continuing the lessons beyond the classroom. And then in topics for week 7 through 8 was, I said we did simulated demonstrations, like what would you do if, like the Ask the Expert, where students served as experts, and then culminating with the bingo game. So the notion here at the end of strength-based counseling is one of my favorite quotes from Toni K. Bambara, where she says, the dream is real. Every child can succeed. Every child can grow. We can touch every child that's a part of this system. The failure to realize it is the only unreality. And we hope that strength-based school counseling can help us address that and make a change. Thank you for your patience and your attention. I went a little longer than I planned, but if you have questions, I'll answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Callaway. Wow, what an enlightful, enlightening, inspiring, and anchoring message she provided for us. And I'm thrilled. I actually feel that you could open up an office right here in the district. But again, I want to thank everyone, and thank you, Peter, who is supporting us with videotaping this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter.